Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
So a moment ago, you saw me vacuuming out these VRs or sliders, removing any remnants of debris or hair or whatever the case. In the first video, I was showing what I was kind of pulling out with some tweezers, and there was debris and hair and all that had collected over the last few decades. So anyways, I'm just going through with a with a brush and just getting some remnants of debris and crap out from between the nooks and crannies. And by the way, you saw me going through and vacuuming with my ESD safe vacuum, and I'll talk about that in a moment. This is an anti-static brush as well. So because of course I don't want to risk an electrostatic discharge that's going to damage sensitive circuitry. Now, on this side of the board, it's not so much of a problem. On the back side of the board, there's some SMD, some chip technology and all that. So, but in any case though, on that note, I just want to mention that the main thing in combating static discharge and whatnot is the environment itself, as far as keeping the humidity level where it needs to be. In the shop here, because obviously I deal with electronics and all that, I keep the shop at around 50% humidity. I don't let it drop too much lower than that. It kind of bounces around, but in the mid 40s, 50%. So, and that's a good starting point, and that creates an environment that is not static friendly. Okay, and again, what I'm doing right now is not so much of a big deal, especially on this side of the board, and I'm just lightly using this anti-static brush and going around, and again just kind of brushing around the nooks and crannies and using an ESD safe vacuum like I already said. So and the humidity, keeping it where it needs to be. But I just wanted to touch on that, and also too, I do escalate ESD precautions as needed, depending on what I'm working on, where I have my hands, and so forth and so on. So I'm not going to really get too deep into that, but right now for this, I'm taking reasonable precautions, and again, the environment is conducive to where I'm not dealing with static electricity right now, and everything is good. So point is, I want to get this board all cleaned out, because as I go through and start performing flush cleaning and really getting these controls flushed out, these VRs, these sliders down here and up here, and I start servicing switches and some potentiometers, these jacks and all that, I don't want anything left over on the board, any garbage. Everything must be clean. So, and on this board over here as well, I'm just going to work on this first and then move over to this half of the board. The control panel is kind of divided in half, the controls, two separate boards, in other words. So anyways, that's what I'm doing now. So let me go ahead and prep up and start getting into some flushing. I'll talk about that a little bit more, servicing controls and all that. And I've done this before, but again, newcomers to the channel may appreciate this kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, and starting with these VRs here on the bottom, all I'm going to do, and I've demonstrated this before, but like I said just a moment ago, newcomers to the channel who are working on this type of stuff, may benefit from this. So that's the whole point. And anyways, so you can see that I have the board positioned for drainage. Obviously, I'm not going to have this flipped around the other way, so and flush the pots from, or VRs from up above, and have all of the contact cleaner just cascading on down the board and dripping on down the board and making a mess of things. Just some common sense. So positioning the board for drainage. You can see I have a little piece of plastic here that I just have tucked underneath the VRs just to cover up these caps down here, these electrolytics below the VRs. That's not necessary. The VRs can survive that, but I just do that just to be neat. Why not? It only takes me an extra second to do that, so no big deal. Everybody has to choose their own way of working. So this is the way that I work, and then of course I have a paper towel down here just folded up under the board so it'll absorb the drainage. And other than that, there's really no rocket science to it. Put on a pair of goggles, use some eye protection just in case it blows back and you don't want this stuff getting in your eye or whatever. Wear gloves. I don't have gloves on right now, but I'm not gonna stick my hand way in here, but just wear gloves. I normally do, but whatever. I'm assuming my own risk, but anyways, bad example, right? But just work the slider over and over and over and over again. That's the key. There's really no magic to it. What it comes down to is you just have to work the either the knob or the little slider shaft here up and down over and over again, so that the contact scrubs the resistive track, and they clean each other with the aid of the solution and flush out the garbage at the same time. So that's why you're going to have to flush multiple times, let things kind of dry out, and then come back and flush again. And that'll do a really good job when you're doing a flush style of cleaning. Now, I don't have the budget or the time, nor is it necessary for me to desolder these VRs from the board and pull them out. If there was one problematic one or whatever the case, I would do that if it wasn't responding to a flush type of cleaning. But all the controls seem to work pretty good. I'm just kind of freshening things up, especially these VRs, because they were open. They have the openings here, and debris worked its way inside. So these need more attention, more than anything, as well as these ones up here. Same situation. They're just kind of open. The tracks and the contacts and all that are just open. So there was a lot of garbage that settled in there. So over and over again. So nothing real exciting, right? And I'll go over here just a little bit, work this one, and I'll just do that, and I'll just keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So nothing exciting there. I'm sorry I can't show you something a little bit more entertaining, but that's about the gist of it. And then when I get into the the part where I've flushed out multiple times, things have dried out and all that, then I'm going to reintroduce the appropriate lubricant. That's why I don't like to use a contact cleaner that has a lubricant in it, because I just like to do it myself. And the percentage of lubricant inside a lot of these contact cleaners that have lubricant really isn't adequate for this. It'll add a little protective film to the track or the pot or whatever, but you get better results when you just are able to add a higher concentrate of lubricant, and the appropriate amount as well. You don't go hog wild and just start dropping a bunch of lubricant inside of a slider or a potentiometer. But when you do a neat job all the way around, you get really good results with the performance of the controls, VRs, pots, and all that. So I'm going to stop this for a moment and just explain that. I'm going to do the same thing up here, and then eventually when I get up here to the jacks, I'm going to use some swabs and probably like a 99% anhydrous alcohol. You could use contact cleaner as well. I'm just going here and clean all these up. Now, and the switches as well, these type of switches, just, a little bit of contact cleaner in there, and then, a drop of lubricant, not a problem. Now these sealed potentiometers here are a different story. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and I'll talk about these a little bit. Okay, so I've got the board rotated, as you can see. I flushed out these VRs over here a couple of times. I'm going to hit them one more time, but I'm letting them dry out in the meanwhile. And while I do that, I'm going to start servicing these VRs, these sliders over here. So you saw earlier that I was carefully vacuuming out any debris and grit out of these VRs because they have this big opening here and stuff was accumulating inside. Well, these over here, and I'm going to zoom in just a moment. Well, let me just go ahead and do that. Okay, well, these VRs, they have no enclosure. It's just a resistive track, open on both sides, on the top and on the bottom. Okay, so there was a lot of accumulation, you know, dust and debris and all that had built up all you know, in between these VRs, and they were pretty messy. So I bring that up once again because you need to be careful, okay, when you're flushing out these VRs and working the slider, the contact back and forth and all that. And also too, it's probably worth mentioning, you'll notice that I have cotton packed in here. You don't have to do that. That's just the way I like to work. I'm very neat when I work. I don't want excess contact cleaner to spill over and drain where it doesn't need to drain and whatnot. It's not going to cause any horrific damage or anything, but again, that's just the way I like to work, and it only takes me a minute to pack a little cotton in here. And as we all know, cotton is absorbent, so it does a good job in just keeping the contact cleaner where it needs to be for the most part. So anyways, let me get back to what I was saying. When you're performing a flush type of cleaning or any type of cleaning, you need to be mindful of getting out all that grit and debris, because when you're working the contact back and forth along the resistive track, everything is fine and dandy for the most part when you're applying contact cleaner, even if it doesn't have a lubricant in it. But in this case, remember, there's resistive track on the top and on the bottom, so I'm just gonna quickly hit both sides. And I was saying everything is fine and dandy when the track is wet, but this contact cleaner, it starts to dry up pretty quick. So when you're working the contact, the slider back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you have to gauge when enough is enough. And it's going to vary depending on a few factors: the condition of the track and, you know, the condition of the contact. Some VRs, they just slide really, really smooth through the whole process. Others are kind of rough. You feel them, especially as the contact cleaner starts to dry, you'll feel things getting kind of rough. It'll even feel a little bit gritty. And you have to know, again, when enough is enough and when to stop. And in between the big flushes, it's good just to add another, you know, just another drop or so. And in this case, being that there's resistive track on both sides, I'm gonna have to shoot a little spray underneath. But you want to just keep it a little bit wet in between the bigger flushes and just kind of gauge when things start to dry out, because you don't want anything to get damaged. You don't want the resistive track to start getting scratched up if there's a little bit of grit. It's hard to get out everything, even when you're, you know, blowing things out like I did earlier, or vacuuming out, you know, hair and debris and all that. You're not going to get everything. And also too, when you're flushing these out, you're going to start loosening up crap. And again, if you let the track just run completely dry, which is going to happen, you know, you're just going to have to gauge if it starts to feel rough and gritty and all that, and maybe hit it again real quick. Just keep it wet and keep working it so nothing gets damaged or, you know, bent or whatever the case, because that little, you know, these little contacts in there, if you're running them dry and they, you know, seize up or whatever, they can bend when you're, you know, just, you know, jamming them back and forth. So be mindful of that. And eventually, you know, you're going to add lubricant, you're going to reintroduce lubricant, but even the degraded factory lubricant, it's still, unless it's really, really bad and it's to the point where things are seized up, it's still going to provide a little bit of a smoothness to the control somewhat, and you know, allow the contact to kind of slide back and forth. But when you start flushing things out, of course, we do want to remove the degraded lubricant in anticipation of getting everything clean and reintroducing good lubricant. But until we do that, we just need to be careful not to damage anything and just run it completely dry and you know, rough and gritty and all that stuff. And things will start to smooth up as you flush out these pots more and more, or these VRs more and more, as you get all that debris out. So just be aware, and every once in a while as you loosen stuff up and the contact cleaner kind of dries out, you know, in between, kind of go through and blow stuff out or whatever the case. So, you know, that was pretty long-winded, but very necessary when you're going through and you're servicing these properly. So anyways, I'm going to continue on off camera. I'm going to, you know, just be doing a lot of repetitive stuff, you know, spraying and moving these back and forth and until they're all nice and clean. And then when I come back, I will start talking about some other pots and switches, like I said already, and go from there. Okay, I hope you're having fun, because here we go. I'm going to talk about these type of pots here real quick, and the main thing that I want to point out about these is, as you can see, they are sealed up for the most part. There are these little holes here and here, and as far as performing service on these, there's some considerations that you want to give to performing service on these pots. Now, I do want to say that the construction of different potentiometers and VRs, sliders, whatever, you know, the foundation is fundamentally the same, but they differ as far as their design and accessibility, getting one of these things opened, and some of them are sealed up. They're not made to be opened. If you try to do that, you know, they're pretty delicate. You can end up, you know, damaging the pot. Sometimes it's just not worth it, and especially if the pot is one in which could be sourced fairly easy, then you may want to consider that route. If you know, you have the know-how and you can desolder a pot from the board, open it up, clean it out, that's good. Or you can just desolder it and replace it with another one, then that's good. Those are considerations, of course, as I've explained before, when it comes to servicing pots. You know, disassembly and cleaning them out thoroughly that way, and reintroducing the appropriate lubricant to the resistive track, and also too, in the case of these types of controls that are damped, so that they have that smooth, buttery feel, but they have some resistance to them as well, so that they're just not all loose in the caboose and just flapping in the wind. Then you need to, keep in mind those considerations as well. So in this case, though, let's say that I wanted to just freshen up the contacts a little bit, and I don't want to desolder them. I don't want to try to go in and open them up, but I do have these little openings here, these little holes here and here. Well then, if I use, again, one of these types of bottles here with this needle applicator, I could get in there and place, you know, a good solid drop of contact cleaner in there, and then exercise the control and let the contact cleaner do its magic, and you know, clean things up a bit and remove any noise or intermittency, if it isn't too severe, out of the pot. But as I was saying, I don't want to introduce too much lubricant, because, you know, again, it's going to dilute the damping grease in there and loosen things up a bit too much, and, you know, past that point of no return. So if I just place a drop in there and exercise the pot, you know, the contact cleaner, as we know, it does evaporate pretty quick, you know, just regular straight contact cleaner. So it might take a little longer to evaporate because it's, you know, mixed in with the damping grease if I put a drop in there, but it will eventually over time evaporate, and then what's left over is still a sufficient amount of damping grease to keep the control damped pretty good. Is it going to be the same as it was originally? Usually not, but, you know, it's not going to be all loosen the caboose either. So that's a consideration too. So that's usually not a bad thing, especially in a piece of equipment this old. These controls are 20 years old now, but they're still in pretty good shape because they are sealed and sealed up pretty good, and which inhibited, for the most part, bigger pieces of dust and debris to work their way in. So that's why they're still in good shape. So but like I said, 20 years old nonetheless, so a little drop of contact cleaner and just kind of work them, and just doing a little preventative maintenance isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to give consideration to just injecting a bunch of contact cleaner in there, and flushing out the damping grease through the little holes as well. And so there you go. I wanted to touch on that, and these are things that you have to kind of think your way through, is the point. Different pots are different in their construction, even their materials internally. So, it's hard to say for sure how a particular pot is going to respond even to a certain type of contact cleaner with a certain type of additive or whatever. There are definitely some contact cleaners that have different additives in them, different types of lubricants and protectants and all that you don't want to use in every single pot. That is a very lengthy topic, so I'm not going to cover it here. But the point is, it's not the same always across the entire spectrum or across the board. So, but when performing basic service like this, there are some things that are fairly straightforward that you can apply in terms of principle-based information. But again, you do need to think your way through and understand what you're doing. Like I said, you don't want to over dilute the damping grease. You don't want to flush it all out. And normally, again, if the potentiometer, the control, is really in bad shape, then the best thing to do really is just, if you can, again, desolder it and disassemble it and clean it properly, and that's the way to go. And if it responds favorably, great. If not, then replace it if you can source one, and usually you can. So those are just things to consider. But I'm not going to go on any longer than this. I'm going to move on over to something else. So that's just some information I wanted to share, and otherwise, let's move on. And as far as switches like this are concerned over here, these are very easy to service, as far as just getting a little bit of contact cleaner in there, and there's no damping grease to worry about. So it's just a matter of, if you have a little applicator, just, I'm putting a drop in there right now, and it's soaking down in there, and then just, work the plunger and whatnot. And then you can also add a little drop of lubricant in there too. Okay. So there it is. And then let's move on to another type of switch. And these are very straightforward as well. All you have to do, same thing, just apply some contact cleaner in there and just work them. You get the point, okay? And then same thing, apply an appropriate lubricant in there as well. And yeah, you're good to go. So let me go ahead and move on. And lastly, but not leastly, I've been touching up solder joints, and like I said, the main area that I wanted to focus on, although I examined all of the boards under magnification, I wanted to focus my attention on the jacks, and I did that. Fortunately, on the control boards themselves, all of those 1/4-inch jacks and all that actually look pretty good. So I'm happy to report that, because there's a lot of jacks on those control boards, obviously, and they all look good. But again, this was the area on the amp board here, these Nutric speak-on connectors and these 1/4-inch jacks here that needed some TLC. So I touched up all of these solder joints and various solder joints throughout. I went through and I found some other suspect solder joints that I just kind of reflowed and all that stuff. So everything's looking really good. I did as thorough of a job as I could on this with, again, the time and the budget I have to work with. And I placed my order already for the caps that, you know, I don't have in stock for the power supply and, again, this amp board. And they already shipped out, so I'm just waiting to get them. And once I do that, I'm going to do one last video, a part 3, but it's going to be a short one. And I'm just going to go over a little bit of you know, application of lubricant on those controls, but that's going to be a lot faster than talking about cleaning and all that stuff. That's going to be less involved. And then I'm going to just show the you know, the result of, you know, recapping and then flash over to everything assembled and then a final function test. So I'm going to conclude this part 2, and then there's going to be a quick part 3 in the coming days. So as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, you all take care.
This is a poor man's shoe production.